think it's going.
Okay.
There we go.
We got it on video either way.
Awesome. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to, I believe it's now our 8th installment of the series Members Presents by the Earthen Construction Initiative based here in San Antonio. I'm Lorandra, I'm Vice President of the organization, and before I welcome our speaker for tonight, I just wanted to give you guys a heads up for next month's presentation. It's going to be called Pass It Forward, and a presentation by a master plasterer, Joe Oranga, one of our ECI members, and that's going to be on Tuesday, October 2nd. And we do this presentation series following our board meetings, which occur every first Tuesday of the month. The board meeting is at 6, and the members presentation is at 7:15 approximately following the meeting. It's open to the public, and it occurs at the Southwest School of Art here in San Antonio. And now I'm going to turn it over to our very exciting presentation by our speaker, Gordon Gates, who's a local architect here in San Antonio and has an awesome project that he's going to be the owner, designer, and builder of.
Something like that. Hey everybody, some of you guys have heard about this project a little bit before, some of you have met me. If not, my name's Adam. I'm an architect here in San Antonio. And I'm going to give you the background on this project, kind of how it got to where it is now, but ultimately I'm hoping this can be a collaborative case study that I can work on with you guys. So at the end of this, I'm really looking for some feedback, any additional ideas you might have, and in particular, as you'll see, any more kind of design parameters that we can use to really make this thing exemplary. Slide. So this is a map of San Pedro Creek downtown. The new Frost Bank building is up here to the north, and the new San Pedro Creek runs a little over a mile down to the area where Cevallos meets I-10. And this little neighborhood right here down at the bottom is where I am. Slide. So if you zoom in, you find this quirky little residential neighborhood with this giant rezoning project around it, right? So the whole deal with San Pedro Creek was that all of these old industrial properties, old mixed properties, are being rezoned to some new kind of urban use. But they left out this little bitty neighborhood. Slide. And in the middle of this neighborhood is a tiny little piece of property that I purchased in the summer of 2016, right as this plan was being approved. Slide. This is what this cute little house looked like when I bought it. You can tell it was a little bit overgrown. It had some nice vegetation out front. A 100-year-old house. I thought, hey, great. I can buy this little piece of property. I'll fix up this house, have a nice little place to live until the creek stuff starts to happen, property value go up, everything will be great. Slide. It wasn't so great. The fixing it up turned into discovering more and more how bad a shape this house was in. I won't share all the images, but there weren't actually very many studs touching the foundation anymore. A lot of it had sunk. Yeah, it was, none of the corners were actually bearing on anything. Yeah, it was fun. Slide. So this is what the site looks like now. It's just a small empty lot just south of downtown San Antonio. Slide. So just to give you guys a sense of scale, and this is kind of the view that we're going to be using from now on, the lot, again, is very small. Once I use my setbacks, 5 feet on the side, 10 feet on the front, 20 feet on the back, I'm looking at a space of 32 feet by 32 feet. Now, that doesn't leave room for any parking, that's not counting any walls, that's just my buildable area, just over 1,000 square feet. So, it's fine. As the ambitious young architect that I am, I started designing for the site. Slide. And designing, slide, and more designing, big, small, bad, good, slide, more different ideas, bays and tall things and little things and houses that could be dropped off on a trailer and pulled off on a trailer, slide. Big buildings, small buildings, solar panel buildings, slide. Little boxes, big boxes, boxes with a slant on the front, slide. More boxes, all kind of little things, big porches, little porches. I guess that could have been earthen design, but I didn't intend for it to be. Slide. So a little more quaint, starting to look at maybe if I just rebuilt what was there, what might that look like. Slide. And then getting a little bit funkier with it, maybe I'll get an easement and kind of variance and push the site all the way to the back and have a big porch over the front, slide. And then, you know, the kind of longhouse model, some different versions of a courtyard, parking in the front. Started using some materials down here, so I really felt like I was getting to something, slide. And then really zeroed in on kind of this idea, right? Small, quaint, big little house, big porch, area to park, gardens out front. And right about this time is when I met the ECI. I met you guys, I think we did an event at the AIA offices. I ran, shortly thereafter, I ran into Ron at the Solar Fest. And I said, hey man, I got this little lot. It'd be cool to do earthen constructions. ECBs or CEBs are pretty cool, but I really like rammed earth. The problem is that I think my lot is too small to really fit everything that you would need. I don't think we have enough space to do it. And he said, you know what? I'm working on a prefabricated earthen block, rammed earth block that you need to see. Check back with me in a few months. So that was December. I think you made your presentation in February. So after that, I said, okay, I got it. I'm going to collaborate with ECI and we're going to do something cool. Slide. So that turned into these kind of hybrid structures, right? So thinking about how we might work together to wire something up so that we can test its performance over time, and thinking, hey, maybe it'd be cool if we had a rammed earth volume and a traditionally framed volume that we could wire up next to each other, and we could test the performance of both of them next to each other over time. So I got down to here, and I really liked what was going on there, but it was a whole lot of construction and a whole lot of rammed earth for not much building area. I was going 2 floors, but I was leaving this area to the west open for parking, so that wasn't occupiable square footage. And I really liked this kind of roof garden I had up on the southeast side, but that only left a couple of hundred square feet in the other volume. So we decided I was going to come make this presentation, and that's as far as I really proceeded. I thought, okay, I need to get this together. Mr. Gates, you're a professional. You can be methodical, outline your parameters, and see where you end up. Slide. So here's where we start. We've got our very tight little site that we can work with, 32 by 32, slide, by 30 feet high. So we basically got a cube that we can work with. Slide. I said, okay, well I'm going to start with this cube as just a rammed earth box. Big rammed earth cube that I'm going to start slicing up and figuring out where I can fit all of the life that wants to be on this site. Slide. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to push it to the west about 5 feet. I'm going to cut off 5 feet of that building so I can make a little driveway, have a place to park my truck, or somebody can park their car in the back. And that's going to be the first kind of square footage sacrifice that I'm going to make. So now we're about 27 feet by 32 feet, less the thickness of any walls. Slide. Okay, next thing I know is that I want ample solar and I want to collect rainwater. The best way to do that is to have a big roof on the top. Have as big a roof as I can. Maybe it doesn't have to be flat. There's ways that we could make a gable work, but this would really be ideal. Slide. So the next thing I wanted to do, from some of the hybrid designs, I realized that I really liked this southeast porch up on the second floor. I've been involved in some urban agriculture things, and I really like this idea of maybe planting a garden or having a space up on an elevated floor to plant some things. So slide. So I thought, okay, this is my eastern porch, lovely outdoor area. I can plant some greens. They got plenty of sunlight to grow. So I know I want to keep that. Slide. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to lower down the roof because I don't need this thing to be 30 feet tall. This still has really healthy 12-foot floor-to-floor plates. So up to this point, we've made room for our driveway by pushing back 5 feet. We've pushed the second floor back an additional 6 to 8 feet in order to make room for that patio. We've decided that we want a big roof on it, and we're going to make some room for gardening. Slide. So what's next? This is the part that I'd really like to open up for discussion. I've got a few more things to show, but fine. So I took the design further from here a little bit, but these are the main parameters that I've been working with. So after I go through some of these other options, I'm going to open this up to you guys and ask, what else could we be designing for? Slide. So here's a few things that could happen just from that basic diagram. How can the rammed earth start opening up to let in light? This southeast side is going to be where all the really lovely light comes in. This western face, southwestern face over here is going to be a little bit more harsh. I don't imagine many windows in that, but it could have some. And this raises questions about, for performance measuring purposes, how much of the rammed earth house has to be rammed earth in order for us to really call it a rammed earth house, if that makes sense. We couldn't have one rammed earth wall and 3 glass walls and really call it a rammed earth house. So how much can be subtracted and still call this a rammed earth house? And see, here you see I'm starting to play with maybe the big porch, so reducing the square footage even more on the inside in favor of a large outdoor area. Maybe that gets screened in. Slide. And here starting to divert back to some of those hybrid options. Again, not knowing whether or not that's a good idea for measuring performance, but it's something that I kind of liked as I was working along. Playing with the gable roof, I think that might be a little bit imposing on the street front because it does capitalize on that full 30 feet. Slide. Again, more options for how this thing might twist and turn and carve. Here, playing with this idea of a double roof so that you have a layer of ventilation between the roof that's actually receiving solar radiation and the roof underneath that is the thermal envelope. Slide. And this is the last one that I ended up with. It's not final by any means, it just kind of has all the ideas wrapped up in it. Carve this back a little bit more to make room for a front porch. We still have our porch above. Large roof, you can see I've got a little bit of space for that vented roof I was talking about. And right here, maybe a portion of this thing needs to become kind of a hybrid wall. And in this case, that's because this rammed earth wall doesn't continue all the way underneath, so I don't want to stack rammed earth on top of nothing. And what I've done in a few of these is made sure to turn the corners. I've got these 6 feet, I don't know what the parameter actually is for making sure we have the lateral stability at the corners. So that's something I'd like to hear from you guys. And then, on the back, obviously the northern light is kind of the best opportunity to bring in some diffuse light, so maybe a lot of glass on the front and some kind of covered patio or deck on the back. And that's as far as I've gotten. That was, I don't know how long that took, but that was 2.5 years of design in hopefully 15 minutes. So with that, what do you guys think? What would, being invited to collaborate in this, what would you guys do? What would you guys like to see that's not there?
I think you could start showing your foundation, since the rammed earth can't go all the way down and touch the grade.
Okay, so what's that elevation that it needs to come up off the ground?
Minimum 6 inches above the top of finished grade.
Okay.
And that's a nice datum line that you would also have to play with for the next set of 50 iterations.
Yeah. Yes, sir.
Have you done research on similar projects anywhere that have been done in rammed earth?
Some, I've looked at some links.
Have you seen some here in San Antonio?
San Antonio, no.
Actually, ECI ought to be able to tell you that right here in San Antonio, just, what is it up there near I-10 and 35, when you go down to that area, they did one not long ago, and it has all of the elements that you're going to be wanting to know.
Cool, I hadn't seen that one. I'd seen some of Ron's stuff out in the Hill Country, and I know that there's some CEB.
Your office is here in town?
Yeah, down here.
Well, yeah, there's some here.
Oh, you talking about David's
David
project
Cummings?
at Eisenhower Road?
No, I'm
Yeah.
talking about the fellow who's now in Colorado. He used to have
Oh,
something.
well, Jim.
Jim.
Yeah.
Yeah, that,
Yeah,
he
what
did
is
for
it?
that.
We have our head
That group, what?
Mujer Active,
Yes.
that's
it.
what I was, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's compressed earth block.
Yeah, right.
That's CEV. But David Comet has a rammed earth housing condos.
Condos on Eisenhower.
On-
Oh, are they rammed earth? Okay, cool. I heard about those somewhere, and I thought they were CEBs.
Phase
Oh.
one.
That's
Okay.
another one.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah, you're doing a swirl.
As you were designing the exterior space, we haven't seen any floor plans on the inside. What at your most refined stage of design, what types of wall thicknesses are you talking about?
So for these tall ones, I was using the 1 to 10. So if they're 24 feet tall, they're 24 inches thick.
Okay, well, one thing is that is a sort of a general guideline. It's certainly not something that's locked into stone anywhere. So you can think possibly about going with thinner section walls, especially when you're talking about turning the corners for stabilization. And oftentimes with the thick round earth walls, if you're 24 inches thick, engineers routinely disregard any sort of stabilizing cross walls.
Okay.
Because the weight of the wall itself is considered, and that's per New Zealand code even. But if you're going thinner and you're using the right systems to build it, I mean, you could be able to buy a lot more interior floor space, which may affect your external elevations. I don't know.
External elevations, maybe not, because I'm just right up against the edges,
Yeah.
but it would definitely free up some interior.
Well, I know
space.
that Michael has done at least some preliminary work on a thinner section, a fairly challenging 30-foot tall elliptical, well, what is that shape called, Michael? Up in Austin, and he's talking about 12-inch walls, 12-inch at 30 feet. So if Michael's talking in that range, it's certainly not outside of the realm of possible.
The slenderness ratio you're talking about
Speak up.
is the unbraced height. If you have a diaphragm that braces it, that's your 10 to 1, or you can go thinner than that. That's just a rule of thumb. There's no
Okay.
engineering involved in that. But if you're talking about the mega block scheme, right? We should be able to get, and this is the goal, I think it's the same thing. The goal is higher quality, better control.
Right.
And so we're going to go places where we haven't been before, rain earth on that. And that applies to thinner section, consistent with the thermal performance. And that's going to have something to do with your orientation, your mix design, and the quality control measures. One of the comments I would have is you have a western wall, and there's no shade on that at all, evidently. That's going to pick up a lot of solar radiation.
Yeah, it is. There is so little. There's so little space. I'll tell you what I did over time. I played with the driveway on the west side with even just one big shear wall that was just absorbing the sunlight. So actually, can you go up one slide? So in an earlier version of this one where I had the parking underneath here, I actually had a space all along this side, even between this volume and that wall, to deal with that solar radiation. What I ran up against was either needing to push all the way to the west or all the way to the east. I had to sacrifice one or the other. And so in this process, I pushed it all the way to the west and chopped off some square footage on the east side so that I could get that patio, thinking that occupiable outdoor space would be kind of more pleasant than the rest. Now, I will say, can you go down a slide again? That wall is southwest, which is going to be taking a whole lot of solar load. I could devise some kind of shading on that. Again, the issue is that that building boundary that I have. Lorraine?
I just wanted to bring up Cesar Hernandez who's watching the video, said he would like to see more trees for shade. And he was talking about shade.
Well,
so I thought maybe you could
that's
address
true. I haven't any, thank you, Cesar. I haven't added any new vegetation to this plan yet. I was working on building things because that's what we were talking about. I'd like to put some nice landscape on the front and figure out which trees will grow in, 8 or 10 feet. Yeah, in a little bitty space. So
one of the principles in this is that dealing different materials can have different. I think personally is going to have different architectural palette.
right.
And I have a similar problem. This is 30 foot tall. Reason being, if you get up and grab some sunlight, because we're in kind of a tree hole, and we'll have some large exposed walls. We were thinking about using a living wall,
Right.
30 foot living wall, to put some shade on the wall, and also the little ET. Use the rainwater collection to nourish their ET on that
Right.
wall. It keeps some of the sunlight off of it. Also raise the humidity on that side. Humidity is an interact with your wall. Humidity is kind of, it is under control, can be kind of a friend. The evaporative.
Cool. Yeah, I love vines up walls. I guess I didn't, when you said shade, I'd imagined this with vines growing up, but it didn't occur to me that that would be,
No, you don't necessarily want the plant material on the wall.
okay.
You want it off the wall. Because there is an issue. We have soil and we have plants, and there could be a incestuous relationship.
Okay.
So the idea is to keep it a few feet off of it, but friendly, 3-5 feet, something you can actually use.
Yeah, right.
Put your surfboard with.
Just a trellis.
It's a freestanding wall.
Yeah, right.
Off the thing that can have some shape to it, whatever. I mean, that's architectural.
Right.
But it's mainly on that, as you identified, the southwest and the west sides. And if it's dense enough, it could be a nice patio space.
Okay. And there again, I think maybe I could get a little bit of space, some variance for a trellis. I don't know yet if they're going to let me build anything like a patio in that front 10 feet.
Well, yeah, some of it has to do with call it a fence. Some ordinances, a fence, you can have a property value fence.
Right.
They don't really define what a fence is.
Right.
And it's, you can call it a fence, it just happens to be 30 feet tall.
I think you can have it if it's projected out and you don't have a structural member that's supporting it. I think you could project it out or some kind of thing out. But another option could be like if you have your rammed earth walls along the side, in that front southwest wall could be CEB actually, and it's perforated, so it's open. And then you have, so it's kind of like a screen, and then
Definitely.
you have glazing all behind it. So you've got this, you can still keep earthen, but it'll be perforated earthen with glazing, maybe a foot or so.
Be nice, like a brisole,
Yeah.
like an earthen brisole
Mhm.
kind of thing.
Mhm.
That'd be really nice. Did you have your units?
Yeah.
Okay,
This
what's
is not completely out of the box, especially for this group, but there has been some science and research that's been done on thermal conductivity
Right.
of different building materials. And once you go in the direction of keeping it a mineral-based material instead of incorporating non-mineral-based materials into your building system,
Such as stabilizers?
when you start to introduce cement stuccos and cement products and paint products that are high embodied energies, they end up absorbing more energy and making the heat island effect. Whereas if you weren't tied to the rammed earth look per se, you could potentially do a 2-3 coat lime system, lime plaster on it, and take it to a completely mineral based wall finish that is not going to absorb as much heat as a earthen dark cement stabilized rammed earth wall system is going to, and create your thermal plate that way with a mineral-based material instead of going to doing air pockets and trees and everything like that, and do a light colored lime wash, and so you get a reflective based material instead of something that is just absorbing your huge sun load.
Cool, so would that be a coating that would go on
Yeah,
something
we go
like
right
the
on
rammed
top of the
earth?
rammed earth,
Or
yeah.
would it, okay,
We did it in up in Santa Fe for Carol Baumgartel's house. Her and her husband was an engineer, and they had a rammed earth house. Up in that climate, the biggest problem is not the driving rains, but the freeze-thaw cycle of the water dripping off the roof and up onto the rammed earth and deteriorating it. So what we did up there is we did actually a wainscot of a hydraulic lime as the splash protector for the bottom of that rammed earth wall, so that we get that breathability. Another thing with the lime-based material is you're still going to get that water vapor wanting to move through and getting your evaporative cooling with that wall system that you would get with a living type of a wall system. A lot of that cooling coming from that living wall system is that the stomatas of the plants opening up and creating evaporative cooling with the moisture through the plant. And so it wouldn't seal up that wall system as an option. As a builder with any buildings, I would like to see a little bit more of a roof overhang over top of the walls, because it's an exposed wall, and rammed earth is pretty bomber, but it is not impervious to the
Erosion.
elements of the world.
okay. I'll have to find out what my kind of allowable overhangs are
Right.
over my setbacks.
It's just where I'm coming from, because you guys don't have a huge freeze thaw cycle here, but you all in San Antonio this last winter got hammered with freezing rain. And
Yep.
so,
It's supposed to be a cold winter too.
well, it's just, you know, the whole thing with our climates are gonna get completely out of whack. I mean, they're gonna go
Extremes.
bizarre. And you're living next to a creek. And so you look at that creek's flood stage of 22 feet, you know, and that's what Lauren was saying about getting that rammed earth up out of the ground. I've got friends and family in Wisconsin, and cities, little towns in Wisconsin right now look like they were built in a lake. That's how bad they're flooding up there. I mean, just unprecedented amount of rain.
Well,
And so-
one question for Michael, the soils in this area are incredibly expansive. So,
Really nice.
yeah, so I mean, does that throw a wrench in this whole thing? Can I use helical piers?
Have you ever done a rammed earth on helical piers?
No, at Esperanza, it's a rubble trench, because the geology allowed it at that particular spot. It's quite peculiar to a particular spot. The foundations are an issue. You've just got to do the geotech, and you've got to know what you're dealing with. Because this type of wall system is not flexible. It's not like wood, and it can move all over the place. And
Right.
it looks ugly, but so you'll need a good foundation, definitely. But to back up something you said, though, there is some science, actually, and it's fairly new science. And I've done some studies myself on the idea of a lime plaster over CED or rammed earth zinc prisms.
So am I crazy?
Not entirely.
Awesome.
Anyway,
We're gonna try to
there's
get it on our house.
an amazing interaction with a lime plaster. It's a very active player. It's not just white stuff on the wall.
Oh, yeah.
It's an important part of the thermal performance of the wall, of the daily cycle. And your wall is a reservoir of mass, but that lime plaster on the exterior and earthen or lime on the interior, depending on what it is, are very active, interacting with the atmosphere. And very important in the thermal characteristics of the wall. This is research yet to be done. That's work with whatever your dimensions are. I'm also pessimistic as to how it's going to look, so that's one reason for putting a line over it. Ron's going to tell me otherwise, perhaps. But I think that'll happen. Work being done in Europe now, some of them actually look pretty good, but some of them you can obviously tell are big blocks.
Right.
I'll let Ron speak to that part of it.
there are creative choices to make about it. You can either express the seams between the blocks, or you can, you can factor the pattern of the blocks. Because the blocks, the panels or blocks, whatever you want to call them, they can turn corners. They can run 3 feet on one side of the corner and 2 feet on the other. You can interlace and interlock them any way you want. You can pretty much design what you want from a point of view of an express control type, but there's also the possibility of going back through and slurrying the joints after it's all up and giving a monolithic look. It won't be as pristine and traditional like what you're used to seeing in the design magazines around Earth. You'll be able to see them, but a good example of a post-parged, we'll call it, even though it's a thin excuse for a parge, but joints is the Ricola Art building, if you can get a picture of how it looks currently as opposed to how it was built, because they have gone back and done that treatment again. So.
I would interject one other practical thing, is you have to build it, and you only have that 5-foot setback. A traditional rammed earth, there's going to be no place to brace the forms and things.
That was one of my first comments to Ron when he said, "Come back later. I'm working on these big blocks." And then later on, I said, "Well, maybe we can do it. We'll just have to see how it all shakes out." So, graphically, I'm showing this as rammed earth. I thought of it as rammed earth, but I'm not totally wedded to that idea. If this needed to be a CEB building with a lime plaster on the outside, I think that would be fine too. I don't think anything about the configuration or anything would be sacrificed if it had to be CEBs.
What is the conditioned space of this plant?
This one here, 11 or 1200.
Okay. Can you think you might be able to live with a 900? Because we probably solve a lot of those problems if you could cut that much out. As far as having good overhangs and really protect the walls, maybe doing a folded plane and get some more strength on it.
Do you have a configuration in mind?
Hey, like you say, you were working on it for 2.5 years. I've been looking at it for 20 minutes.
Well, so if you go, can you click up some?
Perfect.
So one, another one. Nope, down. I missed it. So this one here with kind of the big double porch, that's getting to be about 900. And now you've mentioned I could probably use some thinner walls, so that grabs me some square footage. But this was getting to be about 900 square feet, upper and lower. And then part of that could be screened in and be really lovely. So yeah, absolutely. But what's the magic about that 900 square foot number?
I don't know if it's necessarily magic, but I think that the whole thing about tiny houses is, in my opinion, a huge fad. It works for a very few number of people, but I think the sweet spot is like double or triple that, where you can probably have a family of 2 and maybe 3 living in a relatively small place. One of the first houses I did when I was about your age, designed a house that was 900 square foot for my first client, and it was in 2 pieces on a really small lot, and so it worked out really sweet at that spot. And so I've been kind of keeping that in my head for an ideal starting point is less than 1,000 square feet.
I've had that same thought for myself. I can't help but think about this in the market that it's in and what things might sell for and what people want. Actually, you saw a lot of the first stuff that was really small. That was kind of thinking for me, what do I need? Well, I need what was there. It was like 650 square feet that was there. So I started thinking about that, but ultimately thought, well, I'm going to go to the effort and it's downtown, and if I'm pro-density, I guess is one element of the conversation. Am I being responsible by putting 1 bedroom in downtown? And I don't know the answer to that. It's something that I've juggled. So this 2-floor was even maybe an attempt to get, in one version I had a little kind of Airbnb rental unit in it that was separate. And to go back to your first comment about it being small, if I was going to do that, which I ultimately might, I might just make it 1 floor.
Well, that's what I'm trying to get at too, because right now, compared to the first photo of what was on the site,
Right.
that is demonstrably radically different than probably everything else in that particular neighborhood.
Than most, and here's what's interesting right now, is other properties on this street are selling as well and in this neighborhood. And so it's in this weird in-between stage where all of the existing stuff was really small and all the new stuff is going a whole lot more vertical.
And is that good or bad? You know,
I think it's
I mean,
inevitable.
I know,
If you
and
drive
that's-
through that neighborhood, it looks inevitable.
Yeah,
So it's almost.
well,
Either
isn't
you
it?
follow or you're
Which neighborhood are we talking?
smushed.
if you go, I'm just south of downtown, the bottom of San Pedro Creek. There's one little, if you go all the way back up to the top.
Okay.
So, yeah, there's only 20 slides, it's okay. So right here, so this is San Pedro Creek, Cevallos is right here. There's this little neighborhood that's kind of surrounded by new development. And there again, I don't know the answer to what the most ethical approach is, Lorraine?
I don't know that you'll be able to determine what's an ethical approach unless you actually ran some if you're looking at money or economics and numerical analysis.
Right.
But one kind of piece of information I think is interesting that we don't bring up too much is, the longer the building's there, the less, the more use you get out of it, the lower your LCA analysis is, and buildings that are taller last longer on average. So a one-story house historically will get knocked down before a two-story house, just throughout history, hundreds and hundreds of years like that.
Right.
So maybe that's an argument for going a little bit taller.
And it could be, I could probably still compress it a little bit. I've got 12-foot floor-to-floor heights right now. That could go down to 11 or 10. But you're absolutely right. It's a whole lot bigger than the scale of most of the street. Even the old stuff, there's a couple of two-story houses. It's obviously also very different in form and material. I mean, this is a 1920s stick frame neighborhood, and again, that's in the process of changing. So there's some, in the time that I've bought my lot and taken the house down. Can you go one slide down, by the way? Didn't mention. All of this over here is the salvage lumber from the project, so I did try to do that as much as I could, and I'll reuse that in the project. But anyways, a whole lot of the neighborhood is in this condition, so it's sort of up in the air what's going to come next. I think anything that comes down is probably going to be replaced by something a whole lot taller, because the lots are so small, because I've been told the market wants 1,200 and 1,400 square feet because people are moving in with families, because it's downtown. So those influence the decision to ultimately add more, but there again, it could be a whole lot less. Yes, ma'am.
Is anybody going underground? Is anybody going down instead of up?
No, I've considered it. I don't know how much cost it would add, but also, again, this is
Creekway.
Yeah, creekway, and even aside from water flooding and dumping in, you're going to have a whole lot of hydrostatic pressure from the bottom and from the outside, and people's basements will fill up just from the water pushing through the walls. So I thought that would be fun, but I hadn't considered it a really viable option.
Are you out of the 100-year floodplain? Assuming? 500-year floodplain?
500, no. 100, I'm close, but all of that is, all of that's being mitigated by this creek project.
Yeah, that was my question.
Yeah, it's flood.
Have you looked at how the creek project is affecting that, both in terms of the flow of the creek, but also in terms of the, sociologically or whatever? I mean, up north, the part that's already finished, there's this whole subworks where people have gotten shifted out of the area, just because the new developers bought it and it, you know, it's become a nice
Yeah, displacement.
area, exactly.
Yeah, of course,
And
you know.
that's something that, I mean, I'm on the West Side
Yes.
Oversight Committee, and that's something that we're really concerned about. So I guess if you're thinking about ethical, then part of it would be, how can this be something that, you know, someone who has lived here or
Right.
would be wanting to build a neighborhood that's friendly to what was there or whatever, what would you build to them?
Yeah, right. So obviously everything is changing a whole lot along the creek. This neighborhood especially, I mean, this is an industrial area right now that's about to turn into 300 apartments, right? And so traffic is a whole other conversation. But I've spoken to, you know, my closest neighbors, and because this has been a couple of years, I've been out there working, they come out, we talk. They're surprised by the sudden change, but at least no one has told me that they're upset about it, because they all own their houses cash, outright. The older people in the neighborhood some people own several properties on the street, and so they're selling off a couple of them, and sharing the money with their family, or several properties have been left to a grandchild or the next kind of person coming up. My immediate neighbor, there again, he said he's surprised that it's happened so quickly, but he said, I own my house, it's just money. I'm just waiting. Somebody will come along and offer me the right amount of money and it'll be fine. And then, you know, 2 doors down, the lady says, I really like it. You know, this hasn't been a nice part of town. I like that this is becoming a nice place to be. I like going down to the river. It'll be nice to walk down to the creek. I'm sure there's people in the neighborhood that don't feel that way. And there again, that comes into this wrestling match I have with myself, because if I increase my property value by X amount, how much does it increase everybody else's property value? And actually, the question, and these are numbers I don't know how to crunch, but how much has the creek itself increased the value of properties without anybody doing anything to it? The value of this little piece of dirt has gone up 600% in 2 years, probably more this year. The dirt's worth more than I paid for the whole property now. So, I mean, and that was just because they announced the creek was going to happen. Nothing's happened yet.
Wow.
So, you know, I don't know what factors into those things.
Listen, I hate to be the bad guy, but we need to
Please.
wrap things up.
Oh, sure.
Time to go.
Yeah, that's great. If there's not any other comments, then
I had one comment.
Sure.
What about keeping it the small scale but different multi-levels, so for multifamily? Kind of doing small apartments stacked on top of each other. And without parking it, get IDZ or something like that.
that would be, so that could be possible. So you'd rezone it for a bunch of small units. This isn't something that's in the code, it's just something I feel funny about, is not providing a place to park because this street is so heavily congested. So that, and I only have 40 feet of frontage, and you know, my neighbor to the west of me has 3 cars, and it's already a really congested street. There's a big new elementary school right here that brings traffic in off the side. I wouldn't know how to proceed with this without providing off-street parking.
Scooters.
Gotta be scooters, or even if there'd be a provision for that.
I'll vote for that.
But you know, back to the thought about having a second unit. You know, if I could fit 2 in this tiny little footprint, I think that'd be great. But I'm out of time.
One last thing.
Yes,
Do you
sir.
have a website?
Right now, it's my Facebook page, but AdamWordGates.com is
AdamRGates.com.
Adam Wordgates. If you go back to the first slide, it's just my full name, AdamWordGates.com. I'm newly on my own. So yeah, Adam Wordgates Architect at Facebook website.
So I guess in closing, could you
Yeah.
tell us
where, just where you'd like to take the conversation. I know that this whole thing was about a conversation, but,
Yeah.
you know, what's your schedule, what's the next step, and maybe just, you know, you mentioned collaborating with ECI, and I think one thing was doing some data logging.
Yeah, for sure. The next step would be taking all of the information that I think that we're interested in and figuring out how to fit that into a BIM model so that we can make predictions that we would then measure against with any testing. And even if you don't have a design settled yet, figuring out what those data points are and how to model them would be a really great next step.
Awesome.
Awesome. All right, thanks everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So,